Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
Hey guys, welcome back to First Cut. I'm Sabrina Ramirez and I'm here with RB3. And today we're going to be talking about Malcolm and Marie, written and directed by Sam Levinson. You might know him from Euphoria, Assassination Nation, things along that line. And this is going to be dropping on Netflix this Friday, February 5th. Super excited about all of that. Stars Zendaya, John David Washington, and they play a couple who come home from a momentous occasion. John David Washington plays a director, and they just attended the premiere of his newest film. RB3, this is an interesting film because obviously this is kind of a product of the pandemic, quarantine, writing this script in just a few weeks, kind of basically everybody working on their own stuff. Zendaya doing her own hair and makeup, doing her own wardrobe. What were your overall thoughts going into this film and coming out of this film?
Well, going into it, I was really excited about it because this is one of the first projects that kind of came, that was announced to be filming during the pandemic. It was kind of a big deal that they were filming, especially it was, especially early in those days, it seemed like nobody was going to be able to film, especially in March and April. So this movie seemed exciting, especially when Zendaya, who, is just coming off an Emmy win for Euphoria, with the writer and director of Euphoria, with John David Washington, who's having a really great year as well.
Yeah.
It seemed really exciting. And obviously, Netflix, I don't know what's up with Netflix, man, but they just keep putting out these black and white movies. It's like I guess it's like their moniker now. It's their thing. But yeah, and then we actually, was fortunate to watch it, thankfully, through Geeks of Color, and we saw it together. And
Yeah.
I will say, and watch the experience of watching it was interesting because I really enjoyed a lot of aspects of it, and there's a lot of aspects that I don't really enjoy about it. So I'm a little bit kind of mixed on it overall. I definitely went in with super high expectations, and I think I walked out a little bit whelmed. I think it was I came not overwhelmed or not underwhelmed, but whelmed, so
Whelmed.
that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Obviously, we saw it in specific circumstances where me, you, and Johnny were all able to actually get together and watch a film. That's something that I haven't been able to do at all this past year. And so having this kind of experience again where we're all sitting down and enjoying something, I think it definitely elevated kind of my first watch of it. I'm excited to check it out on a rewatch, see how it holds up. I genuinely really enjoyed this. I think it's a bold and interesting choice from Sam Levinson. As we kind of know, both of us are fans of Euphoria, and coming off of that and coming off of the special episodes that he had over the holidays, and Jules just released probably just a few weeks ago. So I think it's interesting because, he takes on art and criticism. And obviously we said this really is centered around a director and basically a muse of some sorts. And they're working really hard with what they got, and obviously it's a super collaborative effort on everybody's parts, and two great performances. I think that's something that genuinely carried this film. I think if you had anybody else in these two roles, I wouldn't believe it or understand it or just vibe with it as much as I did when I was watching this film. And the three of us watching it together, we really enjoyed it. We had moments of us just bursting out laughing. That's something that from the trailers, I had no idea that I was just going to find so many small moments funny. I think Sam Levinson's really great at capturing authenticity in anything. And with this kind of domestic fight between two people in a relationship, we're basically watching that flesh out over this entire thing. We're hearing about all these moments and experiences, and we're kind of stuck with them, feeling claustrophobic in this space, in this house. That's all we got. We're not doing the whole flashbacks or seeing anything else. We're with these two characters. We're in this same setting the entire time. It's interesting how through the dialogue, because obviously this is very dialogue heavy, through the dialogue, we get to know other characters that are never introduced in the film, but that we know about, like Taylor, the lead actor in his film. people like that, and we really get to understand the dynamic between this relationship that has been going on for a few years, and how they interact with the outside world. We get mentions of his mother, things like that. I think these performances really drive that dialogue home, and I don't think it would be as impactful if it was anybody else. I just think the chemistry is through the roof. And it's also interesting because another question I want to ask you, obviously when this trailer first came out, when the film was first announced, everybody's like, oh, there's a huge age gap between Zendaya and John David Washington. And we had John David Washington say, nah, she's a whole woman. And Zendaya said the same thing, and I agree. I want to know kind of like your take on that.
Well, I mean, I think the age gap thing actually like plays a big part into like the actual story itself. Like they do touch on that like in the actual story. So I think it's actually kind of bed into the thing. But I think that, I get why people will be mad at it. And it's funny because this movie it's kind of weird because this movie is like is to me, I feel like this movie is so close to reality that and the fact that it's written and directed by Sam Levinson. It's about a writer director who is leaving a movie premiere with like the main star of his and his main, and obviously he has a relationship at home, but he has a main star who's like getting a lot of attention. And that main star in, I guess, Sam Levinson's case would be like a Zendaya, right? So it's kind of weird. Like there's technically a part of my brain that like really can't remove the personal aspect like of it. And like, there's that's what's great about storytelling. That's what's great about cinema is like expressing the personal and expressing what's deep down and what's true and what's holistic. But then there's also a part of me that feels a little bit gross like watching this, like because it really kind of does feel like, and the script, like you said, was written in a couple weeks, like very much like a pandemic thing, and it definitely feels like it definitely feels like it definitely feels like a very much like in creation, like this is a fight that me and my wife just had, or me and my significant other just had. Let me just write it down and then maybe exaggerate it a little bit and then like put it on screen, right? And I know that's not what the intent is, but that's just how it feels. And then for me, it just feels a little tough. So and all that, going back to the age gap thing, right? Like the age gap, it's not an issue because the movie is telling you something about like the actual age gap itself, like in the context of the story, right? But then, part of me does feel like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess if maybe it was a different like kind of story, would that age gap thing even be a part of the story? Like, would it just be these two characters or whatever? So it's just interesting. I don't know. It's very, very fascinating. And I guess the closeness to reality does make it a little bit tougher for me to digest, especially when it's something that depicts like something like so like abusive, And that's essentially what this movie is. It's like it surprisingly depicts like how an abusive situation, an abusive relationship can take place, especially when there's like a non-understanding male partner who is like just continues to go on it. And that's what John David Washington really brought to the table. I thought he was really great and electric through it. Like sometimes some people felt like Black Klansman, he was a little I love Black Klansman. Some people watch Black Klansman might think he's not like he doesn't have the most kind of range or whatever off that movie. But if you watch this, you get like all kinds of range of emotions from John David Washington. And
Seriously.
And it really does feel like he's like really channeling, like I hate to keep comparing him to his dad, but to Denzel, but you really do feel like those young Denzel moments in there. You're just like, dang, wow, he's just captivating. And then Zendaya just kills it as well. So that's why it's mixed, because the execution, like the direction itself, like with Sam Levinson's direction, because it never feels boring, it never feels like dry, and like you said, there are a lot of funny parts and there are a lot of like good ideas. It never feels like dry in that sense. So it's great direction. It's also great acting. It's just the personal aspect of it makes it a little tough for me to get behind in the same kind of way.
Yeah, and that's understanding, because I feel like in a situation like this genuinely feels, like I said, like claustrophobic. We're in this situation with them. It feels invasive. It feels like we're listening in onto something that we shouldn't be kind of watching. And I like that you mentioned that kind of like unhealthy, toxic relationship, manipulative, things like that, because it goes both ways. There's no person that's like bad in the, like, there's not one like villain type of character. It's that they both are clearly in love and hate each other, and it's just a very toxic situation in that way. And they've been there for each other through the dialogue that we've seen in different ways. And like, I think the script it's very clearly something that was written fast, but that's why I like it. Like, because it's a little bit messy, but I think it's mostly very, very entertaining and very, very authentic. And like you mentioned with John David Washington's performance, I think it's really hard to deny that he is not talented. He just absolutely kills it in this role. And even in the moments, like, we're seeing the mac and cheese moment in the trailer, and we have Zendaya making him some mac and cheese. And it's just funny. Like, because this movie gets dark, it gets deep, it gets dreary, but it's like alleviated by some of this like random just daily humor. Like, if anybody's ever just walked around with a significant other or a friend or themselves, and you just do things in life, like, you're just acting like a human, and you realize just there's some funny things. And that's kind of what we get in this. Even though it is so dark, it's lifted up by those kind of moments, and it makes it more real and more human. And I do think the dialogue is pretty intelligent and very self-aware. It knows what it is, and it knows exactly who it's going to piss off in the dialogue, which I think is really interesting. And I think the film also knows that it's like a little bit heady and a little bit artsy and pretentious, and which makes it like meta while also being like that. It's very interesting, because I think Sam mostly gets across what he's trying to achieve in this film. And I just really did enjoy how like collaborative. I like the emotional depth, the music that we got in this film. We get a lot of really great music cues, and I think with the black and white and with just the moments of no dialogue and when we just get music, I just thought it was spectacular, and I had chills in those moments. But I really liked, there's like a line when he's talking about his own film that he created in this film, and he's saying like, that film's like about shame, guilt, and how that shit is like inescapable. That's like the quote from it. That's something that stuck with me, because I feel like that's also what this film is. It's about guilt. We see guilt from both characters for different instances. We see shame. We see all these different ideas kind of brought onto the screen. And I'm going to end off with like the backlash on my end. Zendaya, it is incredible to see her in a role where she can actually play an adult, because obviously I love her in Euphoria and things like that. And we saw her in like Greatest Showman playing an adult, but this is so mature, and she is genuinely, I was in awe of her on screen the entire time, the way she's channeling all these different moments. There's a moment when obviously we watched it together, so I know all of our reactions, but there's a moment where there's like a switch, and for a second I was like, oh, okay, wait. And then it switches. It's interesting. I don't want to say anything, but once we got past that, I was like, holy crap, Zendaya is, we already knew, but she is just an absolute star, and it's going to be really exciting to see these kind of like mature performances that she takes going forward that are like this or happier or whatever. But I really do like her collaborations with Sam Levinson playing these characters that are pretty dark. But it's cool to see it that she's like actually an adult right now. But any other takeaways from the film?
Well, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's funny because I always like kind of gotten really mad at the new Spider-Man movies, because I've always felt like they've wasted like the talent of Zendaya, right? Like, I've always really genuinely felt like, oh my God, she's like one of the best actresses on the planet, and y'all are making her do like Disney Channel material again. But you know, that's nothing. That's no shade towards this movie, because yeah, like you said, in this movie she's absolutely amazing and captivating. And like I said before, like everything around the movie, like the atmosphere, the production design, like the cinematography with the black and white, like the creativity and the shots, because you know it's easy for a kind of movie like this to feel redundant or boring or feel stagey, but this felt cinematic, and it felt like intense, and it felt like really dope. So I really liked it on those levels. It just, you know, like I said, like the personal aspect of it definitely, and like you said, like it is about all those themes of like shame and guilt and all of that stuff. There is just a part of me that definitely feels like, man, if it would have been like, I don't know, maybe if it would have been about like a music artist or a painter or something, I think maybe I would have read it a little bit differently. But since it's so specific, like to our industry, and I also think that's also like what also rubs me a little bit the wrong way about it too, because it's like that's what it's like. Our industry is always like at the forefront of movies, right? Like it's like when is Hollywood going to stop making movies? We already got Mank, which is the black and white Netflix movie about movies. Now we got Malcolm and Marie, which is another black and white movie about movies. And then I don't know. I guess there's, like I said, like it just feels like like I like that it feels raw. I like that it feels like a pure artistic expression of what Sam Levinson wants. Like you said, it feels like it was written in 2 weeks. It feels like very much like what's coming from inside of his brain. But then when it comes to like addressing like the another like kind of area that people are going to come contentious with about this movie, like it's like critique on criticisms and like art and like all that stuff. I mean, there's definitely a part of it that definitely feels like this is Sam Levinson's thoughts on art and criticism expressed out of the mouth of John David Washington, with a couple of N-words thrown in there. So it's just like fun. It's just funny. It's just weird because I have a hard time separating that. But that being said, like that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy a lot of aspects like of this movie. Like I did really enjoy the performances. I enjoy a lot of things. It's just like I said, that just leaves me like whelmed. I'm like right in the middle, like with this movie. Like I don't necessarily dislike it. But nor wouldn't necessarily call it like one of my top favorites of the year. But I am willing to acknowledge like how dope it is like on all the other all levels of filmmaking outside of the story itself.
The story, yeah. And I completely understand. I think out of all the like quarantine films that we've got, and that's including like Songbird, Lockdown with Anne Hathaway and Chiwetel Ejiofor, out of all of those, I think this is actually something unique and interesting and intriguing in that way. And overall, I just kind of think it's like sexy and raw and toxic and all these kind of things, like super heartbreaking, all wrapped into one. I think there's interesting commentary on art, the film industry, criticism. It's like you mentioned, it's something that we see pretty often. We even saw in something like Marriage Story. It's a director and his muse. It's a director and his actress. But I think this separates itself because of these performances that I think are genuinely two of my favorite performances of this past year. But because the story worked for me because of, when it's really highlighting like the intricacies of a relationship, when it gets away from the whole director muse type of situation, when it drives that home, that's what worked and that's what stuck with me. And I just think, again, John David Washington and Zendaya were brilliant. They gave incredible performances. They had amazing chemistry. These were two actors that were ready to bring their A game to something like this. And I loved it. I really, really enjoyed a lot of it. I'm excited to do a rewatch at home alone, kind of see how it hits me a second time. But I think overall, this is one of my standouts of something that I was the most like interested in the past year. It might make it into my top 10. Obviously, we'll see this week on the meaning of. We'll check out all of our lists. But yeah, this is one that it definitely stuck with me for a little bit. So I was pleasantly surprised because I was going into the hype. I enjoy his work. I enjoy Zendaya. So this was something I was really excited about. And, guys, leave your thoughts in the comments. Like, whenever you finally check out this film, are you excited to see it? What do you think about the age gap? What's your hype surrounding the film? Definitely let us know. And with all that being said, I'm Sabrina, and I'm joined again with RB3. RB3, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3.
Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed our thoughts on Malcolm and Marie. Definitely check that out when it drops on Netflix. Another black and white film. Very, very excited. Be sure to follow the First Cut account on Twitter and Instagram at First Cut TMO. First Cut Studios on Patreon. A lot of really exciting stuff there. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Sabrina X Monica, and then also on Twitter at Sabrina on Film. With all that, thank you guys so much for watching, and we're peacing out.
Me or you? Take you out the equation. It's either me or you. You do the math, only one can remain.